Good evening. Tonight, we want to thank you very much for joining us for the evening tonight with the Westford Public Health Forum on PFAS and drinking water. My name is Ray Dick. I'm the health director here with the Westford Health Department. And I'd like to let you know that tonight's webinar is being recorded. The presentation will be posted to the health department PFAS guidance page and also shared with WestfordCAT. Please feel free to ask questions tonight by clicking on the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen or by raising your hand. We ask that all questions be asked and we'll be answering those questions after each individual presentation. Tonight, I'd like to welcome our speakers and thank them for joining us. Tonight, we have Eric Worrell, who is the Regional Director with the Massachusetts DEP Northeast Regional Office. Also joining him is Kristen Gervis, who is the Deputy Regional Director with the Mass DEP Bureau of Water Resources. We have Mark Warren tonight, who is the Water Superintendent at the Westford Water Department, speaking on PFAS and its relation to town water. The Westford Health Department will speak on private drinking water wells and those health effects regarding PFAS. And to wrap up tonight's discussion will be Mark Superint and Brian Castoro from Skillings & Sons, speaking on remediation options for private drinking water wells. I would also just like to add that the state and local departments tonight that are represented are not endorsing any particular companies or any particular products. We'd like to thank our speakers, and up first we have Eric and Kristen. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. And thank you for having us tonight. We're pleased to be here to be able to present information to the residents of Westford on PFAS. People have obviously been reading a lot about it in the news. If we could go to the first slide, please. There we go. So, people have been reading a lot about PFAS. So what are per and polyfluoroalkyl substances? There are a family of thousands of different types of compounds that are used in a lot of different commercial applications. They're very and extremely stable. They're heat and stain resistant. They're water repellent. They're dubbed forever chemicals because they're very persistent in the environment and they don't readily biodegrade. And from a drinking water perspective, it's a concern because they're also very water soluble. Some of these compounds are very toxic and can cause health effects, particularly to certain segments of the population, which we'll get into in a moment. If we could go to the next slide, please. No, I think we went one too far. No, maybe it's the next one. I'm sorry, I might have them in the wrong order. Just to focus on health effects for a moment, some of the exposure concerns for PFAS. It's really a potential health effects issue for pregnant women, nursing mothers, or infants, or people who are immunocompromised. For the other segments of the population, it's considered a lifetime exposure risk. So for things that, so water use by people not considered in one of those sensitive groups is a little less of a concern. For non-residential water use in restaurants, workplaces, schools, and for other purposes like bathing and washing produce, it's not an issue. But for food preparation where water is absorbed like pasta, rice, infant formula, it is a concern because it can accumulate more readily into those types of foods. Ways that people can reduce those potential exposures are to drink and cook with bottled water. And on Mass DEP's website, if you search under PFAS, we do have a list of bottled water suppliers whose water has been tested for PFAS and found to be PFAS free. And the other potential option, which we'll get into in a moment for private water supplies, is use of a home water treatment system. And sorry for them being out of order. If you could back up to the prior one, Ray. So PFAS has been used extensively in commercial applications since the 1950s. It's used in textile treatments for stain resistance and water repellency. Some people may be familiar with the brand name Gore-Tex. That's an example. It's used in paper coatings, grease-resistant coatings, waxes, some floor, car, ski, hairsprays, mascara, waterproof down manufacturing, and aqueous film forming foam, or AFFF, is a firefighting foam that was used by fire departments and other emergency responders for many years. So as you can see, it's very common in a lot of different applications across society, and it's also prevalent in a lot of different environmental media in society. And because of its persistence, it's very difficult to get rid of. So we could skip forward. Great. So in Massachusetts, so originally this was part of what EPA refers to as unregulated contaminant monitoring. This was rule number 4, an emerging contaminant, which required sampling by public water systems with greater than 10,000 customers. And this is what EPA does in preparation typically for issuing a drinking water standard. So in 2016, EPA issued a lifetime health advisory for the 2 most studied PFAS compounds, PFOA and PFAS, and had a lifetime health advisory standard of 70 parts per trillion. And then in 2018, Mass DEP adopted a similar guideline for 3 additional compounds at the same 70 part per trillion level. And then in January 2020, again, as all of this science evolved and we learned more about these types of compounds, we established a drinking water guideline of 20 parts per trillion for 6 compounds. We include 1 additional one, PFDA. And ultimately, in October of 2020, we established a drinking water standard for PFAS of 20 parts per trillion, including some consideration for short-term exposures. We also adopted a 21E cleanup standard at the same time, at the same level. So that's what Massachusetts has been doing. I'm going to turn it over to Krista now, because the federal government, as you may have read, is also contemplating establishing a drinking water standard for PFAS with much lower levels than the PFAS standard Massachusetts has established. So, Kristen?
Thanks, Eric. Ray, could you go to the next slide, please? So I know Eric mentioned the Massachusetts regulations for PFAS. I just want to ensure that everyone understands what DEP has regulatory jurisdiction over when it comes to public drinking water, because this is really well defined. So essentially, for a drinking water source to be regulated under our drinking water regulations, that source must serve at least equal to or greater than 25 people at least 60 days or more per year. So that's why individual homeowner wells are not regulated by Mass DEP and are considered private wells. Next slide, please. There are 3 classifications of public water systems that Mass DEP regulates. Those include the community systems, non-transient non-community systems, or NTNCs, and transient non-community systems, or TNCs. The community systems would be your year-round residential populations, such as the Westford Water Department. The NTNCs serve non-residential populations, but they're at least 25 of the same people, approximately 4 more hours per day, 4 more days per week, and more than 6 months or 180 days per year. And that typically includes year-round businesses where the same employees are working on a day-to-day basis, or something like a school. Then lastly, there are the transient non-community systems, or the TNCs, that serve at least 25 different people at least 60 days of the year. So examples of a TNC would be seasonal campgrounds or something like a restaurant. And then in Westford, there are 2 community systems serving a combined population of over 18,000. Neither of those systems have exceeded the Massachusetts PFAS 6 maximum contaminant level, or MCL. There were 3 NTNCs in Westford, 2 of which were exceeding the PFAS 6 MCL. However, both of those systems determined that it would be much more cost effective, I think, to connect to the municipal system. And that's exactly what they did quite recently, actually. So Mass DEP declassifies those 2 systems as a regulated public water system, and they're now considered customers of the municipal supply. And then finally, in Westford, there's 1 TNC. I will mention that TNCs are not subject to the Massachusetts PFAS 6 MCL. However, DEP did require that all TNCs statewide collect at least 1 sample for PFAS, with a confirmation sample required if PFAS was detected. So in the case of this particular TNC in Westford, that is the Butterbrook Crossing Golf Club. They did collect a sample, and that was non-detect for PFAS. Next slide, please. All right. So Eric mentioned the federal proposed regulations. So PFAS is not currently regulated at the federal level. However, on March 14th of this year, EPA did announce a proposed national primary drinking water standard for 6 PFAS. And this really comes as a result of EPA's PFAS strategic roadmap. That roadmap committed EPA to specific actions for addressing PFAS from 2021 through 2024. On the drinking water side, that includes the 5th Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, or UCMR 5. Eric mentioned UCMR 4 in a previous slide. UCMR is a rule that EPA uses to collect contaminant data nationwide, and then that data is used to determine whether to regulate particular contaminants through establishing health-based standards. So UCMR 5 is the 2022 through 2026 round. It does require monitoring of 29 PFAS compounds, and that's for all public water systems serving greater than 10,000 people, all public water systems serving 3,300 to 10,000 people, and then there's a representative amount of about 800 public water systems serving less than 3,300. And those systems under UCMR 5 must monitor for the PFAS compounds, these 29, between 2023 and 2025. But I'll also note that 6 PFAS compounds were required monitoring under UCMR 3 as well, and that occurred between 2013 through 2015. And that EPA, that March announcement from EPA on proposal to regulate 2 compounds as part of that, that's PFOA and PFOS. Those are looked at as being regulated individually, along with regulating 4 other PFAS as a mixture. So that includes the PFNA, PFHXS, PFBS, and then the HFPO dimer acids, which are really commonly known as Gen X chemicals. And then after that announcement, one more, there is a 60-day public comment period with a public hearing that was held on May 4th. That recently ended, the public comment period ended on May 30th, and EPA received nearly 122,000 comments. Next slide, please. Okay, so this table is just really showing you what Mass DEP already regulates as part of our PFAS 6 MCL of 20 parts per trillion. And that is the group of 6 PFAS in light blue on the left side of the table. So if these proposed MCLs are finalized by EPA, they will regulate PFOA and PFOS separately, each with an MCL of 4 parts per trillion. And that's the level at which EPA has identified could be reliably measured in drinking water. And then the other 4 compounds, the PFNA, PFHXS, PFBS, and the Gen X, those would be regulated as a mixture. So there's a hazard index calculation used to determine if the combined levels pose a potential risk to human health. Public water systems would monitor for those 4 compounds as well. And then they compare each of those 4 to the proposed health-based water concentration levels that would be those numbers that are in the far right column highlighted in yellow, the 10, 9, 2009. And those are all currently the level below which no health effects are expected. The release of the proposed standards is fairly good timing for DEP, since really after the implementation of any regulation, we have a required 3-year review period of that existing regulation, and that assessment for PFAS is due in December of this year. And then I'll add that Mass DEP has been evaluating our public water systems, current PFAS data that they've been collecting over the last 3 years in relation to the proposed federal standards. And we've identified about 150 systems statewide that would be impacted by the PFOA and PFOS standards of 4 PPT. There are about 51 of those systems in the Northeast region. And then only about 9 systems statewide that would be impacted by the other 4 hazard index concentrations. And those other systems already exceed the Massachusetts MCL, so they are already being addressed. Next slide, please. And then moving on to private wells, as I mentioned earlier, DEP does not regulate private wells, but we did receive funding in 2021 for a private well sampling program, and that focused on municipalities where greater than 60% of the population is served by private wells. It resulted in over 1,600 private wells being tested with good results, 95% of them having PFAS 6 results below the 20 ppt standard or MCL. Westford was not included in the UMass private well sampling program, so unfortunately we do not have private well PFAS data for Westford. Next slide, please. And then I'll just add, there's really a wealth of information out there for the public to review in terms of health impacts and PFAS in general. There's a lot of information on the Mass DEP website. And additionally, if you could go on to the next slide, there's also further information from the Massachusetts Department of Public Health as well. And there's no shortage of information on PFAS at this point, so it's easy enough to just Google or go to our website and gather in more information if you need it. And that's it, Ray. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Kristen and Eric. I really appreciate it. I'm just checking our Q&A here to see if we have any questions. And I do not see any at this time. I just want to check hands, make sure we do not have any hand raised at this time. So thank you very much. Oh, we do have one. Sorry, just popped up. Go ahead, Steve.
Hi, yes, sorry, I was trying to type a question and I didn't see that you had to unmute me then. I think you're gonna get to it later on, but one thing came up in the slide. So like I have a private well, I'm in Westford, I'm concerned about this. We had actually talked to water filtration people and they actually recommended that we get a reverse osmosis for the drinking water. And then I saw on that slide that you had, it said not reverse osmosis. That makes me kind of concerned. So that's my question right at this moment, kind of thing.
Yeah, and Stephen, thanks for the question. It's not so much an issue of whether RO would be effective. It's a matter of whether you can discharge the reject water from the RO system. So if you're served by a septic system in Massachusetts, you can't discharge that to the septic system. And so it's more that there's not, unless you're hooked up to a sewer, and then some wastewater utilities aren't even accepting discharges of PFAS laden water of any kind. MWA has been cracking down on that quite a bit. So it's not that you couldn't do it, it's just that there are a lot more hurdles than using other treatment technologies like ion exchange or GAC.
So RO does work to remove the PFAS. It's just that if we have RO and it's been concentrating PFAS and it's discharging it, that is an issue.
Correct.
Okay. Are we going to get to later in this presentation about what we are supposed to be doing as private well owners as far as being able to test or testing, or should we have concerns and then what we should do about that? Is that going to come later in the presentation?
It is.
Okay, awesome. Then that's good for right now. Thank you. I really appreciate it. You can mute me again.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Okay, looking to see. There are no other questions at this time. In the panelist box, Q&A. Okay. I'm concerned that our environmental protection group recommends bottled water, which is decidedly not eco-friendly, rather using a simple filtration system. BMC home systems aren't required. We've tested output of our Berkey countertop system with no PFAS detected. Could you please consider not recommending bottled water as a go-to remedy? Okay.
Well, I think the short answer is we do, but if people are looking for a short-term solution, that is an available option. So.
Okay, great. Has any PFAS been detected in Westford's water?
I'll add, I'm pretty sure that Mark is going to discuss that. There are some levels, but there have not been any exceedances of the MCL in the finished water for Westford Water Department.
That's right, Kristen. I will definitely get into that.
Great, thank you. We have a private drinking water well, and we had the SOPA Analytica test our water for PFAS last year, and none was detected. Okay, that's great. All right, moving on. We are going to move on to Mark Warren's presentation. Yeah, that's thing. And thank you again to Kristen and Eric.
Okay, Ray, all set?
All set.
All right, good evening. My name is Mark Warren, and I'm the superintendent of the Westford Water Department. Tonight, my goal is to provide a little background on the water department, including our history, operations, and of course, our current situation with PFAS. And I do apologize that my camera is not working, but I'm not that good looking, so no one's gonna miss out. Next slide. Okay, the water department began its existence as a private concern, the Westford Water Company, and this was all the way back in 1907. A group of local business leaders formed the company to provide drinking water to the mill workers and to address mounting drinking water quality concerns in town. Due to the rising cost of operations, the company was sold to the town in 1955. We became an enterprise fund in the early 1990s. And what this means is that the water department is financially independent from the town. Our funding is entirely from water rates and fees. In other words, we are funded entirely from our customers and we receive no funding from the tax levy. Next slide. So a little bit about our operations. We have over 5,600 service connections serving over 18,000 Westford residents, businesses, schools, and other municipal buildings, sorry. We service roughly 75% of the town. We have 2 water treatment plants, Forge and Nutting Road, 139 miles of water main, 5 storage tanks with a capacity of over 5 million gallons, and 9 groundwater sources, including 7 wells and 2 well fields. 5 of these sources feed the Forge plant and 4 feed the Nutting Road plant. Since we have 2 wells considered to be under the influence of surface water, we are regulated as a surface water system and have to follow surface water rules for treatment. We have a staff of 8 licensed operators, 3 administrative personnel, and a management staff of 3. Our system is blended and has a high and a low pressure zone. And a common question we get, especially when it comes to PFAS, is where does my water come from? So, and this is in reference to public water. The location of your home or business or office or wherever will determine where most of your water typically comes from. For example, if you live in Forge Village, most of your water will come from the Forge plant and consequently from the 5 wells that feed it. This is due to both proximity to the Forge plant and the hydraulics of the system. If you live over on Russell's Way, most of your water will be coming from the Nutting Road plant. However, that does not mean you won't or can't receive water from either plant, as our distribution system is not physically separated. It's blended, but it is separated hydraulically. Next slide. All right, a bit about water treatment. Our 2 plants perform the same functions. We have 5 water treatment processes at each facility. We have filtration for iron and manganese and particulates, disinfection to neutralize pathogenous bacteria, viruses, and organisms. We have corrosion control for lead and copper treatment. We have radon removal. And lastly, we have fluoridation, and that's simply for dental care. And what you are looking at here are 3 grain sand plus filters at our Forge water treatment plant. Next slide. All right, so now on to PFAS. Some of this stuff has already been greatly covered by Eric and Kristen, but maybe I'll gloss over some of that some of that material. So we started testing for PFAS back in 2015 under the federal UCMR 3 program. At that point in time, test sensitivity was not where it is today. And as Eric and Kristen mentioned, EPA guidelines or health advisories were at 70 parts per trillion. There was no enforceable water quality standard for PFAS back then. Seems like another era. We did report these UCMR results in our annual water quality report. Next slide. These early rounds of sampling and testing through the UCMR program yielded results far below the EPA guidelines, and we did not resample until 2020 when we participated in a Mass DEP-sponsored voluntary testing program. Again, results were not only well below the EPA guidelines, but also below the proposed Mass DEP maximum contaminant level of 20 parts per trillion. Next slide. And again, this has already been rehashed, but I'll do it again. In October of 2020, the Mass DEP published an enforceable MCL for 6 PFAS compounds. This MCL took effect on January 1st, 2021, and we began required sampling of the finished water from each plant in April of that year. It's important to note that the MCL is based on the quarterly average of the sum of these 6 compounds. So what we're looking at is the average of 3 months worth of a treatment plant results to be at or less than the MCL of 20 parts per trillion. If 1 or even 2 monthly results exceed the MCL, but the average for the quarter is below 20, then we are in compliance. However, if we receive results like that, that would definitely raise some concerns. Westford sampled all 9 groundwater sources for PFAS in July 2021. Next slide. Okay, so this slide shows the ranges for both monthly and quarterly PFAS results for both water treatment plants since we began that compliance sampling in 2021. You can see that we had 1 monthly result, now it's at the Forge plant, that was greater than the MCL of 20. As I mentioned before, this did not constitute an MCL violation, as a quarterly average was well below the 20 parts per trillion. However, we did issue a public education notice to all addresses in Westford since the 20 parts per trillion concentration was exceeded. Next slide. All right, this one's a little blurry, but this shows all the PFAS 6 compliance results for 2021 and further illustrates how compliance is determined. So if you look for the Forge water plant results, you'll see in July of 2021, we had a 20.6. So that's above the MCL. But if you go over to the next column, you'll see that the quarterly average for that quarter was 10. So we were in compliance with that 20 parts per trillion. Next slide. Okay, so now we're on to source PFAS levels. And I lost my spot here. Okay, here we are. So this slide shows the results for the wells that feed the Forge water treatment plant. These samples were collected in July 2021 and are all below 20 parts per trillion, except for the Country Road 2 well. The PFAS results for this well the PFAS results during that July 21 collection was 58 parts per trillion. We subsequently collected multiple samples from this well, hence the range. More on this in a bit. Next slide. This slide shows the results for the wells that feed the Nutting Road water treatment plant. And as you can see here, all results are below the MCL of 20 parts per trillion. Next slide. Okay, so what you're looking at here is the Country Road 2 well. It's located on, unsurprisingly, Country Road. We did remove this well from service immediately after receiving the elevated July 2021 PFAS results of 58 parts per trillion. Next slide. Oops, one more back. There you go. Okay. Okay, let me see. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, I think I skipped something, but here. Anyway, okay, limited operation of Country Road 2. So after, what we did was, actually, Ray, can you back up one slide? Sorry. Okay, here we go. So you can see here from this table that after that initial elevated result, we collected 2 confirmatory samples and they were even more elevated. So we realized we had a problem. After a several month gap, we went back and collected additional samples. And the first sample, we got a low result, maybe an anomaly. So we collected, 4 additional samples at varying pump rates. And as you can see, they're all well below the 20 part per trillion. So at that point, we thought it would be great to get this well back online in a very limited capacity just to help with our summer demand. So we did approach the DEP. Actually, you can go to the next slide, Ray. And we developed a protocol to operate the well under specific conditions and increase sampling. After receiving approval for this operational protocol from DEP, we put the well back into operation under these conditions. And they include a limited pumping rate and a limit to the percentage that the well can contribute to the plant. Also, this well will only be operated between June 1st and October 31st. And really, this is a very temporary solution. Our ultimate resolution is centralized PFAS treatment. We'll get into that a little bit more. Yeah, okay, next slide, please. Okay, let's see here. All right, so what you're looking at is a groundwater monitoring well. So where did the PFAS contamination of the Country Road well come from? We did get a lot of help from Kristen, thank you, from DEP. We also contracted with an engineering firm, TRC, and we also conducted our own investigation to help us identify the source of contamination. Our investigation did center around the Westford Academy wastewater treatment plant. And this is due to the vicinity of the plant to the well, which is not only about 850 feet to the west of the wastewater plant and leach field, but is hydrologically down gradient. That is, the groundwater flows towards the well from the Academy property. Next slide. A quick note, Westford does not have town sewer. Most residential and commercial facilities have septic systems. The town does operate 4 small package plants that treat wastewater from schools, other municipal buildings, and a few homes. There are also private package wastewater plants that serve some commercial facilities and residential communities. However, all these plants discharge to the groundwater. And that's a key takeaway, is that virtually all of the wastewater generated in town, residential, commercial, municipal, what have you, is discharged to groundwater. The only exception that I can think of is the Neshoba Tech School, which is connected to Chelmsford Sewer. And what you're looking at here is the the Westford Academy wastewater plant. It's located at the south side of the, go back, please. It's located at the south side of the track. In this plant, wastewater is received from 3 schools, Chrysopholy, Robinson, and Westford Academy. It receives biological treatment, filtration, and disinfection. And then it's discharged to a leach field, which, as previously mentioned, is upgrading of the Country Road 2 well. Due to the proximity to this well, this plant has more stringent discharge permit requirements than the other 3 wastewater plants operated by the town. Next slide. Okay, for the source investigation, we collected several rounds of groundwater samples at the Westford Academy plant leach field and samples of the influent and effluent of the wastewater plant itself. We also collected a sample up gradient of the leach field to determine background levels for PFAS. Another thing we did was collect samples of carpet cleaning wash water. As this is, in the past, this has been disposed of down the drain, eventually discharged to the plant. Again, there's that key point. Anything that goes down the drain will end up in the groundwater, be it a residential septic system, town building, school, or an office building. The wash water that we did test contained significantly elevated levels of PFAS, specifically PFNA, which was found at the Country Road well. So why do we do this? Well, as we know, PFAS are found in an innumerable amount of commercial products. Carpets are one of them. The carpets are treated for stain resistance, and they're made fire retardant. These materials traditionally contain PFAS compounds. One of our working theories was that when the carpets are cleaned, some of this material is stripped off and sent down the drain and to the wastewater plants. And that sort of played itself out in some of the sampling that the sample results that we received. At this point, we believe that this process has at least contributed to PFAS contamination in the groundwater, but there are probably other contributors as well. In addition, much of this contamination may have been in the ground for quite some time. Some good news is that the schools are now containerizing all their carpet cleaning wash water and shipping it off-site for disposal. Next slide. Okay, so this slide shows the results for our groundwater and wash water sampling. Note that the well that's hydrologically upgrading from the leach field is non-detected. So you can see here, there's some pretty substantial concentrations of PFAS in and around the leach field for the Westford Academy. Next slide, please. All right, so what are our next steps? We have many next steps. We're going to continue to characterize and define the PFAS plume from the leach field with more sample collection. We're also pursuing centralized PFAS treatment. So why would we do this when we're in compliance with Massachusetts drinking water standards for PFAS? I think this was pretty much already touched on, but the EPA did recently come out with draft MCLs for PFOA and PFOS, and they did come out with that health index for 4 additional PFAS compounds, including PFNA. We do anticipate that these results will be finalized by the end of the year, or maybe early next year. Not entirely sure, but we do anticipate that they are going to be at these low levels, the 4 parts per trillion and the health index. If that happens, this will create a need for construction of PFAS treatment systems for Westford, because we will not be able to consistently meet these new lowered MCLs. And at this point, we are anticipating this cost for construction to be roughly $25 to $30 million. And unfortunately, this is going to end up putting additional pressure on our water rates. We are hoping to mitigate some of the costs for PFAS treatment by participation in a multi-district litigation. This litigation is directed only at the manufacturers of PFAS compounds, which is a limited number, roughly 23 companies, like 3M, DuPont, Chemours, etc. It's not a punitive litigation and is designed only to recover funds to deal with the costs of PFAS contamination. And as of now, I believe 4 companies in this litigation have settled. 3M, and I think DuPont, Corteva, and Chemours. That might not be totally accurate, but I do believe 3M has settled. Next slide, please. Okay, I just wanted to provide a quick explanation for the fire training facility that's under construction at 60 Forge Village Road. This training center is replacing the one on Town Farm Road to make way for an assisted living housing project. It is located on Water Department land at 60 Forge Village Road. As aqueous film forming foams, traditionally used in suppression of petroleum fires, are a significant source of PFAS contamination. I just wanted to assure folks that there will be no use of foams or any chemicals at all at this facility, per a formal agreement between the Water Department, Fire Department, and Select Board. This agreement includes several other stipulations, such as restriction of certain materials that may be burned, frequency of use, etc. There's roughly 25 stipulations for operation of this plant. All runoff from training exercises will be captured in on-site tanks and disposed of off-site. Last slide, please. All right, so here's all my contact information. We also have a lot of information on our website, which is at the bottom of the page, but I'm always reachable at this number and email address, and questions can also be directed to our Environmental Compliance Manager, Doug Yarjo. And I'm sorry if I spoke too much. That was a lot. I apologize, but that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Mark, thank you so much. That was great.
Sure.
All right, let's see what we have for questions here. All right, just give me 1 minute. Okay, could you please explain why PFAS testing results fluctuate so much? Is this common?
Well, I think the short answer to that is you're talking about measuring contaminant levels down in the parts per trillion.
Yeah.
So while the difference between 10 and 18 may seem like a lot, it actually isn't. And There is some variability in the testing method itself. I think it's like plus or minus 30%. So I think the important thing to remember is that you're talking about very, very, very minute levels of contamination that you're trying to measure for. So there's always some inherent variability in that.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that sentiment. I come from the lab environment, and I've actually been somewhat surprised that the levels, our compliance levels, have been so consistent. I don't really see them as that disparate. I think they've been surprisingly consistent. I expected to see significantly more variation, due to groundwater flows, precipitation, any number of things. It's really been a learning experience for us.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next question. If the carpet cleaning in our school releases PFAS, could the PFAS enter the air, perhaps through evaporation from the wet carpets? Are classroom carpets possibly hurting our kids? And can carpet PFAS enter the air?
Well, just again, I mean, it's not just school carpets or municipal carpets. It's pretty much all carpets. I think now you can actually try, look for and purchase carpets that are so-called PFAS free, but it's not limited to the schools. It's not limited to commercial buildings. It's really all carpets. As far as can the coatings become airborne? I do believe they can be, raised into dust. But can you expand on that, Ray, or?
So I do not have the knowledge at this point. I'd have to look that up, to be honest with you, to see if it's something where you can be exposed from evaporation from the carpet.
And as far as evaporation goes, I have no idea. I'm just thinking from a practical standpoint. If you're walking on carpet, if you're vacuuming it, you're going to be removing some of those coatings, and it's going to be inevitably become airborne.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Next question.
Can I just add one thing?
Oh, sure.
Just to go back to the carpet. The PFAS compounds are extremely stable. And that's why they're in use in so many things, because they don't break down very easily. And so that, again, I'm not an expert on any kind of evaporation rate from carpeting into air on PFAS compounds, but I just want to point out how stable the compounds are to begin with, and they do not break down easily.
Great, thank you for adding that. Next question, will waste go off-site? Concern for environmental equity. Mark, I think that might be for you, for the wastewater.
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. It says, will waste go off-site? Concern for environmental equity. I believe you did say that all the wastewater moving forward at the academy, when they clean the rugs, will be shipped off-site, correct?
It will be disposed of off-site, and I don't know specifically where it's going to go. That's being handled by the facilities department, but it's going to go to an approved facility. That's all I can say. As to where they are, I don't know.
Okay, great. Thank you. And we do have one question from Stefan.
Hi, yes. So we're concerned because we are near WA, and that the country road well that had the high levels. How do we find out? Because location is critical. You could be near, and if you're upstream, no big deal, or you could be downstream and it would be concerning. So how do you find out where like ground flow waters are moving towards, and whether we should be concerned? And then what are we supposed to do about this if we have a private well? Are we supposed to be paying ourselves to get this tested, or is there going to be something later in the presentation about what we're supposed to be doing, particularly if we're in the areas where there's a high level of concern?
Well, Ray, I'm going to just quickly address the proximity issue. So groundwater is generally moving in a westerly direction, from the academy property across the country road well property. And I say generally, it could be even more of a northwesterly. I'm not entirely sure, but it is westerly. Another important factor is how deep is your well. I mean, our well at that site it's a shallow well. I believe it's 75 feet, maybe less, but it's not a bedrock well. It's a gravel packed overburden well. So we're capturing basically different water than a deeper bedrock well would capture.
Yeah, I would also just add that the next presentation will go over testing, but we would recommend if you have a private drinking water well to test for PFAS, and that would be something that you would need to pay for yourself as the homeowner. Okay. Great, and next presentation, let me just pull that up. Okay, so the next presentation that we have this evening is for the Westford Health Department. My presentation will go over private drinking water wells and the impact on your health. The first presentation that we have here tonight is private drinking water wells in Westford. I wanted to just emphasize that 25% of town residents are serviced by private drinking water wells. Clean drinking water is considered a homeowner's responsibility. And Westford has local well regulations that you can find on the Town of Westford Health Department page. We do require well testing for new homes here in town and also for homes that are being sold here in Westford. We do not require at this time that PFAS testing is required for any private drinking water wells, but it is certainly encouraged and recommended. Like many states, PFAS is not regulated in wells, and it does enter through groundwater through movement of soil, as well as groundwater movement. PFAS can contaminate water supplies, and here I just have an image of some of the products that contain PFAS. A lot of folks are unaware that they're in shampoos and cosmetics, certainly chemicals, Teflon, cookware, things like dental floss, when you go to cook your microwave popcorn, stain resistant products, as we were talking about earlier, with upholstery and carpeting, and candy wrappers. So there's all kinds of products that do contain PFAS. This is just another image too that also shows, you know, some water resistant clothing, fast food packaging, pizza boxes, certain fast food packaging when you eat that food out of that packaging can contain PFAS. Some health effects that you can be exposed to PFAS is by eating fish that's caught in water contaminated water bodies, as well as accidental swallowing of contaminated soil or dust, eating food made with contaminated water, or food grown near places that may contain PFAS that produce it on site. Again, eating food packaged in material that contains PFAS, and using consumer products such as, again, cookware, water repellent clothing, carpeting, things of that nature. Some health effects, how you can be exposed. Drinking contaminated water and eating foods, again, prepared with that water. Some groups, again, I know this was mentioned earlier by the VP, but groups that are of most concern are pregnant women, nursing mothers, infants, making baby formula, and cooking foods that absorb that water. One suggestion, and again, this is a suggestion, is the quickest way to reduce that risk would be to drink or use bottled water that has been tested for PFAS. And I do have a link here from March 31st, is our most up-to-date list of bottled water that's been approved in Massachusetts that does not contain PFAS. Some health effects from PFAS exposure. As you can see, it's quite an extensive list, everything from decreased fertility, cancer causing, thyroid, increased high blood pressure, cholesterol levels, increases of kidney and testicular cancer, preeclampsia in pregnant women, small decreases in infant birth weights, and scientists are just beginning to understand and study the effects. There are over 4,000 different types of PFAS. And this data does come from the Centers for Disease and Prevention, which is the CDC. How do I reduce my exposure? That's a question we get a lot here from residents here in the community. These are just some recommendations. Again, it can be difficult to avoid PFAS when it is in so many products. So what we suggest is that you just reduce your risk to the best of your ability. And that would be avoiding products that contain PFAS, testing your private drinking water well. If your water does test positive for PFAS, consider remediation practices. Again, as I mentioned earlier, if you have a private drinking water well, you are your own responsibility of your own well. It is not regulated here in Massachusetts or in Westford. You can contact your local water department as well as the health department, and we'd be happy to assist in any way possible to questions. Check out if your cookware has a Teflon coating. Try to cook with stainless steel or cast iron recommendations. Consider avoiding not only many products that have PFAS, but stain-resistant carpets and upholstery. And one suggestion is to make your popcorn on the stovetop and avoid those microwavable bags. There are guides to help you. One question we do see a lot from residents is, where can I find products that don't have PFAS in them? And so here I just have some links to some pretty popular guides. There's a shopper's guide to avoid PFAS that's put out from the Clean Water Action. That's really great. It goes through all different kinds of products that you use every day in your home that have been tested for PFAS. There are sites such as Amazon that if you do put in PFAS-free products will come up, all different kinds of products that have many different options that have been tested for PFAS. And there is also a new guide. It's called A Slick New Guide to Avoiding PFAS Forever Chemicals. And this is used here in Massachusetts for statewide contracts so that municipal entities can purchase products that are PFAS-free. So the biggest question tonight, and we get from residents, is should I test my well for PFAS? And we would definitely recommend that here at the health department, especially if your well is in with 2 miles of a known PFAS contamination. We would suggest you limit your exposure with filtered water. And a lot of folks ask, well, how much is that going to cost me? On average, that test is about $400 to test any private drinking water well, and that includes irrigation wells. There are, again, no set limits for private drinking water wells or irrigation at this time. No PFAS in water recommended. If you, for instance, test your water well and there is no PFAS in the water, it is recommended by the CDC as well as the EPA that you continue to test your well every 10 years. And due to consumer products, some septic systems, as we've heard tonight, and landfills can also be a source of PFAS contamination in groundwater. So if you find that you live close to the landfill, we certainly would recommend also that you test your well. How can I test my well for PFAS? So you can certainly, again, call the health department. We can walk you through the process of how you can do that. We do have pages of how you can take that sample. We have a list of certified DEP laboratories that you can take your sample to. There's a searchable database of laboratories here in Massachusetts, and we can certainly guide you with the closest labs in your area. We have, again, this bottom one here speaks to field sampling guidelines for PFAS. Okay, and what are we doing about regulating PFAS here in Massachusetts? Certainly, the Health and Water Department here are providing education to residents, not only for tonight's webinar, but we've been out at farmers markets, strategic planning retreats, and all kinds of different events to get the word out to residents and answer their questions. We do have guidance, PFAS guidance pages both on the water department and the health department page that are linked together. We are updating those regularly with new information as it comes in regarding PFAS. We also put out quite a bit of information out on our Facebook pages, social media pages. We do participate in letters to our House and Senate representatives. We would encourage all residents to also do the same. There is a bill here for Massachusetts for PFAS, which is Bill H2197. And so these are some of the 1 through 5, some of the components to that bill. I know California just banned PFAS in products, and that was effective January 1st, and that's something Massachusetts is also looking to do. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. Again, if you have questions or you have need more information, I did provide the health department's main line, water department, the Mass DEP drinking water program. They also have at the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, the environmental toxicology program, that has a lot more information on health effects due to PFAS. So that's also listed here. Some additional resources, as Kristen mentioned earlier, there you can Google just PFAS in Massachusetts and loads of information come up. But these are some of the trusted sites that here at the health department that we go to. Again, the CDC, Mass DEP, they have a lot of Q&As. They have a whole page just on private drinking water wells and suggestions and recommendations. The EPA has several packets and information on PFAS, and again, I mentioned the guidance pages here in the community. So if there are any questions, let me just check. What mitigation options? Here, what mitigation options are there if reverse osmosis is not an option? So we're going to go over that in just a minute. We're going to have Brian and Mark from Stearns & Sons to go over some of those options. And let me just check. See if anyone has their hand raised. Yep. Stefan?
Yeah, so thank you for the information. It was very useful. I have a question sort of about, you said for private water supplies that we could get away with testing once every 10 years, but it seemed like the public water supply is tested like much more frequently. And particularly when you look at the data from the county road well, it looked like it varied drastically from the incredibly high to not too bad in shorter timeframes. How do you reconcile that? Because I could test my well and maybe be on the low end and then think I could wait 10 years, but that doesn't seem like what the data from the county well reflected. Am I missing something?
No, so, on our end, if you're, according to the CDC and the EPA, if you test your well and your well comes back below the EPA required limits for public drinking water, then you are not required, well, you're not required to do anything, excuse me, but you're not recommended to test it again for 10 years. So it's up to you if you want to do it every 5, but that's again, if you test and there's no PFAS in your water supply. They're letting people know you should still continue to test, but you don't have to do it for 10 years. And again, that is from those sources.
Thank you.
Yep.
Ray, can I just add a point? I know that the question about mitigation options, if RO isn't an option, and the bottled water question came up earlier. There are POU or a point of use or point of entry devices that have shown to reduce PFAS levels generally below the original health advisory standard from EPA of 70 parts per trillion. I would just recommend to homeowners looking to put treatment, either POU or POE device within their home, that device be meet the standards, certified to meet National Sanitation Foundation or NSF standard, what's called P473, because that is the standard for PFAS removal, generally below 70 parts per trillion, not always below the Massachusetts MCL of 20. but they have been found to significantly reduce below 70 parts per trillion as well. So it is important if you have, concerns of PFAS in your private well that you do test, and if you are putting treatment online within your home, that you also that you also test to make sure that treatment system is effective. It's not really recommended that you just put a treatment system on and walk away from it and hope for the best. They usually need upkeep and maintenance.
And Kristen, would you also recommend, I know for folks, we get this question a lot, they just put a treatment system on their kitchen sink. So, from the DEP's perspective, would you say that we want to make sure that they have a system that is filtering the water for the whole house?
It really depends on what the use is, because PFAS is not generally a concern for absorption through the skin. So for showering or cleaning dishes or anything like that, it's really an ingestion issue for PFAS.
Great, thank you.
Ray, can I pipe in with a quick question?
Sure.
Are there any disposal concerns with these point of use filters, really for any home filtration system? I mean, what happens to the spent filter material?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, Mark. And I think some of that is probably unknown because of what a private residents may choose to do
Sure.
in their own home. But I wonder if Brian or Mark might be may want to during their. I'm sorry, I haven't seen your presentation, so yeah. I don't know what you'll be talking about, but that may be included there.
I'll go mute.
Okay, thank you. And Mark and Brian, I don't know who would like to start.
Well, we could probably go together. I think you're on mute, Brian.
Got it. Okay. So the class that I went to, there was a representative from Waste Management. And as of right now, there is no regulation as far as disposing of it. So disposing of spent media, spent cartridges, the carbon itself, if it was loose carbon, Waste Management will take everything. There's no regulation on it now. And they've been monitoring their leachate, which is leaching from these landfills. And initially, those leachates were really, really high. But now everything seems to be coming down, because I think what they've, the standards that they set, and a lot of these products have stopped using it. So they've seen the levels start coming down. But as far as right now, Waste Management takes everything. They'll take everything. So there is no regulation on it now. And the other thing is, we know less about it than obviously we don't know as much about it as of now. We're just, I think everybody's just continually learning about what's happening with this.
Yeah, I think the one caveat that I would add to that, as again, there's a lot of rapidly evolving knowledge and science around PFAS. I do think it's very likely in the coming years ahead that you're going to see other environmental media being regulated for PFAS, including solid waste and landfills. And Mass DEP is already requiring certain landfills to test their leachate just to gather information. So that is, you're absolutely right what you said. That's the case today. That may change in the future.
And the other thing I can say that I did learn is that there is some plasma vortex destruction, and there is a pilot going on Cape Cod right now that they're trying to dispose of this by this process. And then they set up these giant trailers, and then they just use this process to get rid of it. That's one of the, they're on a pilot program right now, and that's probably, within the foreseeable future.
Great. And Mark and Brian, could you possibly go over some of the remediation options that homeowners would have for private drinking water? Well,
Yeah, so there's point of entry systems that would treat the whole house. That's either carbon or ion exchange. The carbon is one of the more known process that we use now, because the ion exchange is kind of new. The ion exchange is also twice the cost of the carbon, but we have carbon tanks that we use, typically a lead lag tank. We put a water meter on them, so we can monitor how much water has gone through them. We give a audible alarm when we think, you know, you should test the water again to make sure everything's working okay. Or at that point, you could even just say, okay, instead of testing, I'll just do the service. So we have systems that are point of use or point of entry. The point of use systems are they can be hooked up to multiple faucets. That is a cartridge that you would replace instead of loose carbon or loose ion exchange resin. That carbon cartridge is it's made for 50,000 gallons. You would put a water meter on that, and then the disposal of that carbon cartridge is kind of the big question still. It's like, how do you get rid of this big giant carbon cartridge? Will your municipalities take that, or do you have to find other means for somebody else to take it? So that's kind of still up in the air.
Yeah,
but those are
as of now, it would be considered household waste, but in the future, who knows what's going to happen with the cartridges.
Right.
okay, so any other options?
No, as of right now, that's it. There's they've tried even this ion exchange resin that they're using. It's non-regenerable, so there's no discharge from it. It's absorption only. Once it's reached its life, it's over. Then you dispose of it. So there's no regeneration with it, not like other ion exchange resins where you would regenerate it with salt. This is non-regenerable. And the tests show that the ion exchange is, although it is twice the cost of the carbon, it lasts twice as long too. So the carbon is an option, or the ion exchange is an option, but obviously both of those non-regenerable. So once the life is over of those, that media, it's gone, it's over.
Okay, and I do have a question from Erica Cole. Erica?
Yeah, I just unmuted. It's not my phone. I just wanted I was the one who asked about the countertop device. I think what was spoken to here was suggesting that they are shown to go below 70, but not necessarily beyond that. And I just want you to express my experience that we had our water tested, both what was coming out of our faucet that we put into our countertop filtration bucket, essentially, and what was coming out of it, and what went into it had substantial PFAS. Now, the lab we used tested lots of them, not just the ones that were regulated. And so the water from the town was above 20. What came out of our Berkey countertops system, which is very easy to use. It's just you pour the water in and then water comes out. And that had zero, it had nothing. So, I mean, I know that the studies that were cited here say that it gets it only below 70, but that wasn't our experience. We went from having substantial PFAS in our water to zero. So it's not as scary as it seems to be stated here. And I also want to point out that sadly, these are here, right? They're in our cookware, they're in our carpets, and they're clothes. So this discussion about, well, what happens to the stuff that has to go into the trash. Well, it's going into the trash no matter what. And our trash goes to get either burned or buried. But if it stays in the carpet, eventually it ends in the trash. If it's in our sofa, it ends in the trash. It's in our jacket, it ends in the, hopefully, it might end in the trash or in a consignment store. But all those things, I understand the concern. I have it too, but they're here already, and that's
Correct.
It's where we are. All right.
Right. At this point, it's about reducing your risk.
Right. Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Thank you, Erica. All right. What is the cost for a point of entry carbon or ion exchange? From Marsha Young.
For the point of entry carbon filter systems, we seeing the pricing come in around the $4,000 mark. Although I haven't priced any of the ion exchange. Have you, Brian, lately? Yeah.
You're muted.
I have not for a residential system, but I would think if we're coming in about $4,000 for the carbon system, we're probably going to be about $6,000 to $7,000 for the ion exchange. I have priced a few of them, and the cost, the media cost is twice the cost. So it's not the whole product cost is twice the cost. It's just the media cost is twice the cost. And then obviously with those systems, you want to do your follow-up testing as well, which will obviously add to the cost. Yeah. And we do offer the testing afterwards as well. And like the other person said, their results got down to not detect, and that's typically what we see after the carbon filters.
Okay, great. Excellent. I don't see any other questions at this time or hands raised.
Ray, I'm just out of pure curiosity here. And maybe Erica can answer this question, maybe not. I'm just curious, what is non-detect? Because there's different reporting limits, and I'm just curious if these tests were using the current low reporting limits that, for example, the water department uses, and it may be the case. I'm just really kind of curious to see what that non-detected result those non-detected results really are. Do you know what I'm saying?
No, and I'm sorry to interject, but that's actually a really great point, and I think that's the point that Kristen was trying to make, is that you want to make sure that whatever POE or POU system you're installing is capable of truly getting down below the soon-to-be federal drinking water standard. And the other important thing is to make sure that the laboratory that's analyzing is getting down to the lowest method detection limit possible. Right now, that's 2 parts per trillion. And again, this is just by experience that we've observed with public water supplies, not these 2 gentlemen on the call tonight, but there are a lot of people out there hawking a lot of different types of systems that they say can solve PFAS problems. And so it's really just to create awareness to make sure that it's an NFS approved treatment technology. It gets down below 4 parts per trillion, and any analyzing that you're doing is getting down below the current method detection limit of 2.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate that. Oh, we do have a question. Stefan?
Yep. So if we go through those Department of Water websites that you mentioned, Ray, you give
There we go. Stefan, did we lose you?
Yep, I don't know. It remuted me. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So you gave us instructions how we could reach out to your department. You guys give recommendations for places that would be able to do testing that meets those standards? Because when we were kind of looking around privately, that's what we kind of got, was a bunch of different companies that didn't really seem like they knew what they were doing. So we're trying to be economical and go to something that's reliable, we can get that information through the links that you gave us for specific testing.
Correct. And you can always call us at the health department and we can certainly steer you in Mass DEP certified laboratories that do tests for PFAS.
Yeah, Stefan,
Awesome.
if you go to our website, Stefan, you'll see the Mass DEP certified labs for PFAS. So
is that the same website that she had put up? Are you with the same group kind of thing?
Yeah.
Honestly, it's kind of embarrassing to say this, but the quickest way to get to our website is just to Google Mass DEP PFAS rather than trying to navigate our website.
That was Mass DEP PFAS. You said Google that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Anytime. All right, great. Any other comments or questions? Okay, great. Perfect. Well, I would like to thank all of our speakers tonight. I really appreciate your time and efforts and the PowerPoint presentations and being here to answer all of our residents' questions. I would like to just remind all of the residents that tonight's presentation is being recorded. We will certainly offer that to our local station, WestfordCAT, and we will put that up on our web pages here at the Water and Health Department. And again, just a special thank you to all of our speakers, and we all hope you have a great evening. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.
Good night.